This is Literary Roadhouse, one short story once a week. I'm Karina.
And I'm Gerald.
I'm Anise.
And I'm Andy. This week, we're joined by Karina, a friend of the show who got her master's in Victorian literature from Indiana University, and also my special friend. That's my full disclosure statement, because otherwise, right, there might be some sort of collusion. I just want to head off all the accusations. Mm-hmm. Karina, welcome to our show.
Yay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So this was very last minute because we were, when Andy realized we're reading the Effluent Engine, he mentioned it to Karina. Turns out that you taught this story.
I did.
Yeah. So what university and
why did you teach it? At Indiana University. I read the short story actually sort of when it came out and had it in the back of my head as something that would be interesting to do. I taught a few composition courses while I was a graduate student at IU. I did one that was on science fiction and cultural studies, using imaginations of the other to think about how our society is structured. And the Effluent Engine was a really good match for that. So I've graded probably upwards of 100 undergraduate essays on this story.
Awesome. I hope we get an A.
Yeah. Gerald D-.
There's got to be a curve, right?
There is.
Yeah.
Never mind.
So in summary, this fairly long story, borderline novella, starts with our protagonist, Jemisin Dumond, landing in early 19th century New Orleans. And instead of the usual coming to America and isn't it great story, we get coming to America and gosh, it's a mess. Everything smells. There's rampant depression. She encounters immediate and egregious sexism. But it turns out that she's actually come into unfree New Orleans as a free woman of color from the liberated Republic of Haiti, which in this alternate universe has successfully thrown off their master's chains and remained free through the expedient of harnessing every aspect of their rum distillation process to power dirigibles. And with that increase in air power, they're able to resist reconquest by the French, etc. Jemisin is in New Orleans because she's trying to get the next advancements on this technological warfare development plan going. There's someone in New Orleans that knows how to refine effluent, which is the super stinky, super nasty byproduct of rum distillation. And she's come to try to recruit him. Turns out he's kind of a dweeb and not actually very useful, but actually it was his sister Eugenie who's the genius all along, and also, oh no, she's hot. So various drama occurs. There are derringers, there's disguises. Nobody takes any notice of Jemisin because she can leverage her social position to pass as all different walks of life. And ultimately, Eugenie and her brother kill a local bigwig and have to run off with Jemisin to Haiti.
Yeah. And I don't think about it is that, and Eugenie is going to make this contraption, so they're going to set their dirigible.
Right, even better.
They
had a plan, it got smashed, but they'll make it even better.
Right, they'll take the brain instead of the blueprint. Yeah. Awesome. Cool. I love that. I love that you described Norbert, wasn't he, right? As a dweeb.
Yeah.
That seems about accurate. He was he was so dweeby also when his sister and this woman who he met a week ago are making out in front of him and he's just sort of standing there okay, when do we go? I love that. I just love to imagine they're making out and he's just there on the side okay,
Anyway.
This is just happening.
Oh.
Okay, so I want to start with Gerald's opinion on the story, or your reception of it, because in Slack you said that you didn't expect to read a lesbian steampunk story, and it wasn't a description of this podcast. Also, you dropped spy thriller, which is the part that I love the most. I'm going to assume that you said that because you're so happy that we did.
Am I happy that we did? I'm neither happy nor sad that we did. I was surprised by it. I enjoyed it. I liked the connections to real history. So the Norbert was a real person, a real engineer and chemist, and so was his sister.
Toussaint. Her father, who led the revolution, actually did lead the Haitian Revolution.
Yeah.
And he was killed the year before Haiti, taken back to France. Napoleon was like coming in hard. And then he was killed in France before his lieutenant the following year won and was able to declare Haitian independence, which is very exciting. I'm like, let's just throw this name in here.
So it's such a blend of genres. And I think that's the thing, it is a little bit of a spy thriller. She's coming and she's got the derringer, she's got a stiletto knife, she's got and she doesn't mind killing people and stuff like that. So I quite enjoyed that, and it's a mixture of that and historical and steampunk with the dirigibles and yes, there is a bit of a lesbian love affair in there. So it's this whole sort of mashup, but actually it works. It seems to work. It all sort of fits nicely together.
Yeah, I'd agree. Andy, do you think it works?
Yeah, super a lot. Okay. If I'm just looking at the steampunk part, like steampunk's the very specific flavor of alternate history, and I think what separates a good kind of steampunk from bad is, for me, in my mind, what about their history or their world made them be able to do awesome steampunky inventions that in our world we couldn't? Like, what made steam boilers and coal better than it was in ours? And so, like, in the video game series Dishonored, it's whale oil that they base everything off of. And you're like, okay, but whales aren't magic. But in this one, when you finally see a picture of a whale, they've got like creepy Cthulhu tentacles, like whales are magic. And then so when you make whale oil, you can do magic stuff. And like in Deadlands, instead of coal, they use ghost rock, which is secretly the spirits of the damned compressed into coal. And then you can make stuff out of it. And so like in here, like, okay, but so why do they have friggin' dirigibles? It's like, oh, from rum distillation. Like they captured the steam and the escaping gases, and then the process of making the rum made them be able to resist the superpowers. And now they're like going a step further with methane from the effluent. And it makes what they have be different, but it's so tied to what Haiti was doing, what resources they had available. Like that's why Haiti's better than France, because they don't have sugarcane. It's just neat. It's still tied. It's good. I like it. Makes me excited.
Good. I wasn't sure if you would end on excited or not, because it seemed almost like that could have gone into a criticism.
Yeah.
No, that's the best thing. That's the best thing ever.
So, Karina, when you first read the story, why did you decide, I have to teach this? What was it about the way that Jemisin crafts the story that really drew you to it?
Actually, there was a lot of context around the original writing of the story that was also interesting. I believe it was written for a Help Haiti charity auction in the aftermath of one of the big, terrible earthquake events, maybe in 2011. And a lot of the depiction of the aftermath of the earthquake had leaned really heavily into depicting Haiti in this very third world, impoverished way that is not actually very accurate to the reality of like modern day Haiti. Everywhere looks like that after a disaster. So the trick that Jemisin pulls of making Haiti the center of the revolution, and in fact the utopia, I thought did a really interesting job of decentering the usual hierarchy of the world that you sometimes get in genre stuff, where like there's an apocalypse, it must be in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Right. That instead of having impoverished, tragic Haiti that's the third world and in desperate need of Western charitable intervention, you've got a work that respects Haiti's place as, like, in fact, the only place that did have a historically successful slave rebellion. It didn't last because of economic issues, but Toussaint Louverture's rebellion worked. He took that victory. Haiti was one of the only places in the world at that moment in time that did have that revolutionary liberation going on. Yeah, so I was just really interested in the way she was building the utopia.
Yeah, and I like that you brought up the fact that she's defying the sort of typical world order, because she defies a lot of things. And even just having not only do we have a female protagonist and a woman of color, a Black woman, but she's also very, very, very dark too. And she makes a point to say that, like, don't high yellow this in your mind, right? Like I like.
And consistently the beauty language is flipped, that Eugenie is paler, but Jesseline's kind of like, well, she's still pretty even though she's kind of light.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I guess she's still pretty. At first, she goes, oh, she's plain for being so pale.
Because she's not dark.
Right. It's awesome. Like, I loved all of that. Yeah. And also, just there's something about the way that she named things. Like, well, actually, you would know. I didn't look it up. Maybe I should have. The white supremacist group. Did she make that up? It sounded really made up. Or was that real in New Orleans?
I don't actually know. I would 100% buy either way, though.
Right.
I mean, some of that white supremacy stuff gets very. They have wizards, right? Like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it gets very highfalutin, very fantasy language. So I have no idea. Actually, now I don't want to look it up. But I like that she was constantly breaking your expectations of the genre. And I also like that you mentioned about the world order flip. Now I remember what I was thinking, because it was one scene that I didn't understand what it was doing for the plot, but it's doing great things for the theme. So when she's dresses herself up kind of dowdy and she wears pillows to make herself not so alluring, which I loved, she goes to the dock that is a port in New Orleans that's Haitian territory, and she hands a note, and I'm like, nothing ever comes of that note as far as I can tell, or maybe I missed it, but just having a scene where there's all these people who want to go to Haiti to escape the United States is extremely powerful. Yeah, I love that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what themes are explored. So Karina kind of started us off there a little bit. I feel like she has all the answers, though, 100 papers later. So
undergraduate papers, though, so.
You definitely have all the wrong answers.
Freshmen.
Yeah. So we know all the wrong answers. So Andy, what was the story about to you? What themes were being explored?
Man, why you gotta give me such esoteric questions? I wanted to talk about blimps.
We can talk about blimps, but we gotta do this first.
I don't know. It's about kind of freedom and independence. That's the recurring bit, right? Women are free to lead their households even with another woman. People of color are free. It's a point of pride, and not being under the heel of white supremacists.
Right. Sorry, I just looked it up real quick. Knights of the White Camellia, totally real.
Yep.
Similar to and associated with the Ku Klux Klan.
Yep.
Excellent. 19th century. A bunch of dandies. Look at that bow tie. All right. For real. Of course it was. Yeah. So sorry, Andy, I was just looking that up. Yeah, I agree with you. But also, can we dig like a little bit deeper? Because there was something about the way that she established the racism in New Orleans. That was the first time I really, I was reading the story, okay, everything smells bad, all right. But I think the line where I sat up and I was like, oh, okay, I'm in the hands of a master, was when she meets the white camellia guy but doesn't know it's him. And let's see, someone jostled her. Should not surprise her. Where was the line? The correct mix of reference and deference, but there's a line where basically she smiled at him because that's what she's supposed to do, and she knows that role. That was just really good. Yeah, she was forced to stop because the earnest-looking young man who stood there was white. That was the line. She was forced to stop because he was white, which I just immediately, you're like, she just, without beating over the head, you're like, this story is going to be about this. Wake up. This is second paragraph. That I just thought was super effective. And she kept doing that throughout the story in a way that I found, just, she never beats you over the head with it. Because again, with this subject matter, you don't have to necessarily when you're talking about slavery. And I thought it was interesting that she dwelled on that. She dwelled on class, but she didn't dwell too much on the lesbian couple at the heart of it, which I thought was nice. It was kind of refreshing, you know? Like you would think that would be a big theme, but other than a passing line of like, oh, in America that's not proper, but in Haiti it's totally fine. I kind of like this this gay utopia of Haiti.
Yeah, I think there's so many sort of underlying themes and points of interest that she and it could have ended up a mess. It could have ended up a real mishmash of stuff that didn't work. But she's got the core of this sort of almost an adventure story, a spy story. And you say about taking the message down to the docks. I think I'm presuming there is no further mention of it, but I'm presuming that was a message back to her handlers at the spy agency in Haiti or something that just telling them what's going on, because the guy who took the message reacted differently to how he took messages from the other people. So I presume that's what she was doing.
And she reacted differently because Jemisin didn't look desperate. She just recognized this isn't an actual slave based on the way that she composed her face, her demeanor, which I thought, again, was just perfect. It was just so good.
Because it ties into the spy story character of the whole thing as well, that the spy protagonist is always looking at the society that they're infiltrating and making keen observations about it. The thing that Jemisin is infiltrating and making keen observations about is American racism. So that's like she's perceiving all of this as like the specific enemy territory that it's her job to navigate without setting off any of the frag mines.
Yeah, it's racism, and then on top of that, she also puts in just wonderful little ways the sexism as well, where she doesn't condemn Eugenie for not having better options. Like basically, Eugenie can only be coddled. Basically, like she's under this patriarchy, so the choices available to her aren't that great, and she doesn't condemn her for that. I thought was a wonderful line when they were at the convent. Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about on the show before. When does genre become literary? What does that even mean? What do we mean when we say literary fiction? And I like having this conversation as many times as possible because every time we do it, it's a little different. Gerald's grinning over there, so I'm going to start with you.
No.
I know. Gerald, do you think this is purely genre, whatever that means, but that's the language people use, or is it also literary, and if so, why?
I think it is both. I think it's literary with a strong genre theme. So we talk we talk on the podcast a number of times about having icebergs. So you have a storyline above the surface, but you have a subtext and themes and all the other stuff below the surface. So this has got an awful lot below the surface, but that above the surface thing is a strong story, and it's quite an exciting story, and the characters are really interesting and different, and I love the way that she perhaps uses the steampunk thing to make the history more palatable. It's like, you know, I don't like historical fiction, but this was fascinating because the steampunk bit made it like another world. So it wasn't, you know, it had strong links to history, and it had strong links to factual things that went on and real characters. But I just thought that was really well done, that she could create this strong narrative in a genre, in a sort of mixed mashup of genres, but then have all these themes running along underneath it at the same time. So is it literary or is it genre? It's both.
Yeah. Andy?
Well, in terms of the iceberg, the thing I hate about literary fiction, even so far into the podcast, is when it's all subtext, and that's hot garbage, as I've said before.
Me too.
Where it's like, okay, yeah, sure, you've got all kinds of brilliant insights into the human nature going on and making us think about what we are, but your story's dumb. And this one is an amazing story that also has brilliant insights into human nature. So I don't care what it is.
Yeah.
That's my take.
Okay.
Good point.
And
Yeah.
Karina, as someone who's taught English classes, does this distinction even matter to you? And yeah, if it does or if it doesn't, just how do you separate genre from literary in your head?
Well, I mean, it's not even so much just like, does the distinction matter, as it is a question for me of placing it in a context of literary history. And I actually think steampunk is an interesting way to approach that, because it's a mode that loops back through literary modernism into the Victorian era. People writing Victorian novels would have seen no distinction between genre and literary fiction. That was not a thing until the modernists of the early 20th century started developing this concept of a high literature. So, like, even beyond the obvious Gothic Victorian authors like the Brontes, I mean, a huge core of George Eliot's Middlemarch, which arguably is like the height of literary fiction, is that they're going to build the railroad through the town. And all the people are like, how is this going to change our life? And that story of impending technological innovation and social transformation as a result is what you get in a steampunk story like Jemisin's. So, like, it's both. It's neither. Maybe in another 100 years, these categories will have totally transformed, right? And we'll see literary fiction as a late 20th to early 21st century art form that partakes in certain mimetic conventions of the et cetera, et cetera. Definitely teaching the story, the aspect that Gerald mentioned of just the ease of access and the sort of like fun, rollicking energy that the familiar adventure story elements put onto a pretty dark social history was key in my appreciation of it in that context.
I like the idea that it might take 100 years to even know what we mean by literary, because sometimes we think back, you know, to a lot of the older novels, and it seems like almost all of them could now be considered literary. But I wonder if there's a lot of novels that no one pays attention to anymore because when they came out in you know, the 19th, 17th centuries. It was hot garbage, so it just didn't survive the centuries. And really, it's the stories that survive that are literary. And the reason they're considered literary is because they're speaking to some human truth, some condition that has made it stick with us the way that something like Middlemarch does, even if it has elements that are not purely literary. So really, what we're saying, that's been my take as we do this, is when we say literary, what we mean is it's not just giving you a magic system for the sake of giving you a magic system, right? Like, we know the, like, I would say like hyper genre books where it's like, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to take away from this as an adult reader. There's an interesting system of, you know, there's like, have you ever read a really fantasy novel? Has a really interesting political system, but it doesn't in any way make any political commentary somehow? Like, have you ever like experienced that?
Frequently, yes.
Yeah, like, if you're going to give an interesting political system, then I want some political commentary about society and the way that it's structured and the way that power moves around. You know what I mean? And if you don't, and if you do that, now it's literary, and that vehicle is shining a light on that theme. So I think what we mean by literary is it needs to, even if it has all these high fantasy elements, even if it's got aliens or whatever it could be, it's like a lot of Octavia Butler's work, like Bloodchild, which has aliens in it, but it's talking about power and slavery in a very distinct way that will stick with you forever and probably make that story never die. And I wonder if that's what literary is. Like, really, that's what we mean. And now, because we have so much access to information, we're trying to pre-label it. We're trying to say what's literary now, but there's a lot of literary that probably won't survive 100, 200 years. That's kind of
if someone said they liked literary fiction, though, I don't know that I would recommend this to them.
Right. You know,
because it doesn't feel like that. There's some vibe that they probably want that is not what this is.
Right. And I think that's what you were saying earlier with the like mimetic like vibe. We call it on the show the MFA voice. Like,
yeah. Iowa.
Yeah. MFA voice that you just like drips through. Like the prose here has so much like genre specific like tropes and syntax. Like, for example, hard stairs. Constant flushing. Like, there's a lot of stuff here that's just like, you don't get that in literary fiction, modern literary fiction, or an MFA voice, that I read it here, I'm just like, this like fantasy mantle I'm putting on, this very specific language that you only get in this like genre. Yeah.
But it's all being wielded very intentionally.
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Is like Jemisin is taking these things that feel very familiar to genre readers, because like she's talking about racism and feminism and classism, and then randomly she's throwing knives at someone jumping off a balcony. Like, she's doing both, you know.
Yeah, I think as a genre writer, I think all genre writers, if they want to produce a good, satisfying book, they want to have some themes in it, so that there has to be some underlying theme that the author wants to bring out through the plot of the book. And I think so. In that case, you've got genre with themes. I think with literary fiction, it's theme with a plot. So maybe the difference between genre and literary is the intention of the author. So by exploring themes, maybe then they think, oh, I've got to have some sort of narrative arc along the top of it just to carry the story through from start to end. So maybe it's the emphasis of the author that defines whether it's literary or genre.
And I think you have to be seeing something on the theme that you play, right? Because I think I've read a lot of like the genre stuff where I'm just like, I don't understand what this magic system is supposed to be telling me about anything, other than it's cool. Because sometimes they'll throw, like, those stories still have a theme, but it's like the theme of friendship and friends stick together. Like that's too base, I think, to grip someone's consciousness in a way that makes them feel alive to something, right? You need to have someone feel like they got some insight about that theme that you are exploring. It can't be like banal, or it can't be like child fable like in that theme, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. I like having that conversation because it's because I remember when Andy joined, he resisted literary. Still does.
Yeah.
Right. I was gonna say, when I joined.
Well, hold on. What was that story we read? With the kid who went off into the church that was falling apart, that was crumbling. It was very weird.
Oh yeah.
We love that story. That was pure literary. Like I don't know what genre that is.
Well, that's creepy house thing. God, what was it called? The haint? The haunt? The haint?
I'm gonna find
The
it.
hymns? The chant? The
Chaunt.
chaunt.
The chaunt.
Chaunt.
The chaunt.
Yeah.
Yes.
Horror is genre.
Yeah, but it's not horror. He's trying to give it a genre, but it doesn't actually have one.
I gotta read this.
He's trying really hard, but it's not true. Yeah, Chaunt. Chaunt
Yeah,
by
it's-
Joy Williams. That was fantastic. And it genre defying. It's not really horror.
Well, that was a comedy, though.
Oh, you just said it was horror. Now it's horror comedy. It's also like
Horror comedy. That's the best of both worlds.
but it also did have the MFA voice of like, you know how a lot of like MFA Iowa type voice loves one of the favorite subjects is grief. That was all up in there.
Mm.
There's also grief porn.
Yeah, but it was hilarious grief.
It was very funny grief.
I couldn't see your eyes rolling,
It's like
Andy,
the
but I could-
funniest
I could
story I've
feel
ever
the-
read about two dead kids.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so it seems like what we're saying is the good thing about Jemisin playing with genre is she's taken us on a fun journey, right? I felt like I hit that tractor beam feeling that I like to feel when I read a story. If you're not familiar, I've said this before in previous shows. Tractor beam is like when I stop reading it and analyzing it, and I'm just reading it as a reader. That's that. Like, oh, I got sucked in, and I definitely got sucked in with this one.
Yeah, because I go along and I highlight sort of nice phrases and interesting lines and things like that, and then they dried up after a couple of pages because I was so there's nothing. There's like the first 10% has got little bits and pieces, and then nothing because I thought, oh, this is a good story, so I stopped doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but she does have. I mean, she doesn't have an MFA voice, but she has a very clever way with words. Like that, like there's one bit that says, talking about Haiti and stuff like that, and it says, "Yet Haitian sugar was no less sweet for its coating of blood." And I thought, what a great line! That's a very good line.
I pulled that paragraph out and put it on the projector when I was
Oh,
teaching
yeah.
it, and I know exactly the one you mean.
Yeah,
It was a good line.
yeah, it's beautiful.
yeah.
That whole paragraph that just sets up the. She does it like it's like a dance metaphor, right? All the politics and the violence that they're
Graceful waltz.
right, and it's all sort of beautiful and bloody and massive and wheels turning.
Mhm.
Love that passage.
And it's a bit of it's just a tiny little bit of an info dump. It sets the world, it sets the scene of why she's here and what the countries are, and it's just the one paragraph, but it's really it just you know so much more having read that paragraph.
Yeah. So, Karina, since you've taught this so many times, what are some elements that we haven't discussed yet that you would make sure to teach in your class?
Oh, that's a good question. I think maybe one of the things we haven't touched on, we talked about the theme of freedom, but not about the various depictions of types and degrees of freedom and compromised freedom that are shown in the story. That the sort of travelogue aspect of it gives Jemisin the opportunity to sort of show you portraits of a lot of different types of mitigated freedoms or unfreedoms.
Yeah, so let's rattle them off. I have a bunch that come to my mind, but Andy, do you see what Karina's saying? Like, what are the different kinds of freedoms that we see?
Well, yeah, and so like part of it was all in her disguises, where she's like, okay, now I'm a freed woman and I can do these things, but like now that's not appropriate for me to be a freed woman in this scenario. So I'll be a close house servant to a wealthy white person, and that'll let me do these things.
It's even in the different stories she tells on her journey where she's coming in, right? First, she tells the captain she's indentured, So that's different. He waves her aboard, doesn't even look at the papers. Then she tells the other passenger she's a white man's mistress. And then she tells the dockmaster that she was a slave, and is promised that if she's gonna get, that she will be freed if she continues to serve to her fullest. And the dockmaster doesn't believe that's true. So just in one paragraph, within one ship's journey, she puts on a bunch of different masks that have different levels of freedom.
Right. And one of the sort of historical reference for this is that if you look at the time period, sort of throughout the Caribbean and all of these different colonial or ex-colonial regions, really different ways of looking at race emerge that are all incredibly strict in their own context, but sort of mutually unintelligible. Someone that would be considered white in one area is dark in another. You have the existence of kind of bubble populations like the gens de couleur libre, the free people of color who had sort of a half status in some of these French Caribbean, early American cultures. This is all, sort of as that territory is being Americanized and brought into the Americas. But before that, it's really part of the French Caribbean circle, where race is somewhat fungible.
Right, because Eugenie and her brother, the brother, is resentful that he isn't given the full freedoms of a white man, even though he has full French blood,
Right. Yeah. And perhaps on other islands at that time, he would have. There's sort of this tension of do you try to optimize your social standing? But then also, what are the constraints of passing? And what are the constraints of wealth? That Eugenie, as a light-skinned woman, is kind of caught in this trap where passing seems like an easy and sensible thing to do. If she keeps her head down, she can have a good, safe, materially secure life. Not really, but sort of. It feels like that. And one of the ways she grows over the story is by sort of realizing that actually maybe it's better to stand on the ground with her own 2 feet and have the freedom of self-determination.
Right. But
she has to sacrifice.
And which Jessica makes a point to say, just so you know, you're not going to live like this in Haiti. Not that it's going to be bad. You're going to, in fact, it's the trade, the material for the sort of the spiritual, really, just that sense of dignity, worth, and purpose to your life that you can get in Haiti, but you're not going to have this house. You're not going to have the servants, because you remember there's another smaller character, but there's all the servants, none of whom are slaves, but are still servants in Eugenie's house. Yeah, that's a great point.
Can I just say that I think that's the first time in the history of this podcast the word fungible has been used. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Just.
Yeah. Okay. And yeah, that's a great point. With the theme of freedom, having all the different kinds is really something. And I'm glad that you mentioned the Creole, sort of class in New Orleans, because the guy she meets at the very beginning who jostles her, the secret knight of white camellias, he makes a whole point. He's acting. It's so bizarre why he even forces this contact, but he's just he calls her a negress. And then he goes, wait, you're not a Creole, are you? My sister said that would offend you. He's doing this whole thing where he's playing on this class stuff. That scene is really funny when you realize who he is, because it's kind of nonsense, but it establishes the class divisions along race lines so effectively. But in terms of
such a creep.
Yeah, why are you doing this? You gain nothing from this.
What's important about having Chekhov's creepy, pasty white guy in the beginning is that when he comes back in the third act, they were able to still, without making her cool super spy be less of a cool super spy. It's it's because these guys were so terrible at being spies. That's why they slipped under her radar, because they're just dumb, bumbling doofuses.
Right.
That she brushed them off. That guy couldn't be a spy.
He can't be a spy. He sucks.
As a reader, you're what happens when you've got to check out spacey white guy in the first act.
Of course.
He's going to get all super rapey in the third act.
Yeah, I mean, obviously. Oh, yeah, that's the other thing. Is like the rape threats, which is just like, again, she didn't beat you over the head with it. It never felt gratuitous, but also it felt like that's about right. Like especially with the sexist and racist lines that she's been toying with the whole story. But of course, as soon as you see this white guy in the beginning, you're like, he's coming back. But then when the way that he comes back, I'm like, I don't know why he did that, but he's really tough.
Because he's a bad spy.
Bad spy. The nun is a better spy than him.
Yes.
The nun's a great spy.
Spy nun. She's great.
I also like how like her coming over to New Orleans is supposed to be a big deal, but they just had like, is this nun there year round, like a plant, because she has to live there. I love that. They just have like this nun spy plant. Like
Well, yeah.
Someone has to be the resistance.
yeah, like
Right.
the suggestions of a greater world in a short story are always fun.
Well, yeah, because Haiti's a superpower. They've got to have implanted agents. And so she's there on a mission, but the nun's there,
She's like the
Just step-
Wakandans,
right.
right?
Yeah,
the
they-
Wakandans that have to go live in Oakland.
Exactly. Yeah, she's just gathering intel year round. So yeah.
Did you break your chair?
No, I just snapped. The arms come up and down. They snap to a lower setting. Yeah. So anyway, anything else we want to add?
I got to use my joke about Chekhov's spacey white guy.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's a good joke.
Check that off.
Mm-hmm.
Check off.
Oh dear.
Okay, I think we've done the story justice, and we've been discussing it for like 45 minutes. So 41. Yeah, it's right there.
Yeah.
Okay, so we always rate. It's a scale of 1 to 6 because why not? Who wants to go first?
Guest go first.
Guest goes first.
Guest goes first.
Can I give it a 5.5? Is that okay? Are we allowed half ratings?
Yeah. Half,
Like
Wow.
it's so close to being perfect. I don't know. There's a way that I feel like the end, just the train barrels through the station toward the end there. There's so much going on, and it just kind of comes into a landing like, oh wow, okay, that was really fast. And I don't know if I want another 100 pages or maybe like 3 fewer subplots. Just for maximum perfection. Yeah. But at the same time, I can't think of anything that I don't want in there. But it definitely, like there's that fashion rule about you're supposed to take off one accessory before you go out the door. It did not follow that rule. It has all the accessories.
Yeah. And the romance felt extremely rushed. Like I went with it because sure, why not? But I'm just like, I don't know how.
Right, like it was fun, but like the story is definitely wearing like 3 scarves and bangle earrings and a headband and big bracelets.
Yeah, I'd agree. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. The romance felt so rushed that when she just went in for the kiss, I actually cringed a little bit because I was just like, girl, you need more of a green light for that. You need a bigger runway before you just come in. And this girl who's been raised in a very sexist, homophobic, racist world her entire life. Like, how does she go from, everything that she is, Eugenie, to like, tell me more about conjugal same-sex marriages. Like, how did that happen? You sit under a willow tree for 5 seconds and you're ready.
Yeah, but they're in high stakes circumstances, right?
Yeah.
There's spies and tensions, and people are getting shot left and right. It's like
it sweeps effectively, but like at the same time, you're kind of like, man, what is this going to look like when they actually land? Like she did say to Eugenie, it's going to be different, but like there's going to be like the morning after here, and it's going to be a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll go next. I initially wrote a 6 down, but it's not a 6 story for me. A 6 story has to be boom, 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 hitting all the beats and work perfectly. And it wasn't quite. And Karina's point about it racing towards the end and the all lived happily ever after is a bit too convenient and. It's like she thought, oh geez, 10,000 words. Oh, I'll just finish this off, and and submit it. So yeah, but 5.5, sure. It's a fascinating story and really enjoyable. But yeah, 5.5 for me.
Andy?
Well, I was going to give it a 6 also, and
I've ruined the curve.
No, I was coming in
Okay.
lower. So.
well,
Okay.
so like I don't believe in half points because I think they're the coward's way.
You've already done it once, Andy.
I don't
Yeah.
believe
Yeah, that
in
was-
grades.
Very specific circumstance.
Hmm.
I don't know. Do I still want to give it a 6? Yeah, I do, and I will.
Wow.
Because you know what? More dirigibles powered by rum runoff is everything the world needs.
You're probably right. Yes.
Okay. I'm sort of torn. I don't know. Am I too low? Okay, so we grade these very personally. So if I'm grading it very personally for the kind of stuff that I'm going to chew up and read forever and like tell people go read this, it might even be a 4.5. I also feel like I know why she rushed it at the end because like all the plot, all the action scenes, everything that's actual spy thriller, she always ran through in every scene because
Because you had to put in the details, and that would be hard.
Well, I don't know if it's just because it would be hard, but it's because what she's actually interested is the things that she put the details in, like that
The rum.
whole metaphor with the waltz
Rum.
and the blood on the sugar canes. What she really wants to talk about is power structures, freedom, racism, sexism. All of that gets a lot more, sort of like words per theme than like the action scenes. So I feel like she rushed at the end because she I hope maybe this is how it feels to me personally. Doesn't actually care too much about the spy thriller part of it. I'm like, okay, that's fun. But
Yeah.
don't care. Like that's not the part that always grips me. So I think it's a 4.5 for me personally. And also while reading about hard stares and constant pink flushing felt a little bit like wearing a mantle that I know very well. It's like a security blanket. I do still appreciate when there's those stories, you know what I mean? Not necessarily the MFA voice, but just when a voice feels a bit more distinct, which sounds mean, but we all know what I mean, I hope. So
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Very good.
Okay. So because Karina is Andy's special friend, she gets special privileges, which means she gets to skip the game and just recommend next week's story.
I do? I
Yeah.
wasn't told I got to skip the game. I was told I
Oh,
had to
yeah.
recommend a story.
You're skipping the game. We're just
I'm
gonna do it.
skipping the game. Okay.
Yeah, we're just reading it.
We're just gonna read it. That's the privilege.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
man, I didn't realize I was on like syllabus duty, Andy. Well, the story I'm going to recommend is called The Wreck at Goat's Head, WRECK, Wreck, by Alexandra Manglis.
Okay. I look forward to reading it. All right. But before you go, sneak into our online assets and dead drop your comments on our Facebook group, the Literary Roadhouse Readers, or on Twitter at LitRoadhouse, or our website, LiteraryRoadhouse.com. If this story made you want to read more of N.K. Jemisin, join the Literary Roadhouse book club where we discuss a novel each month. And I'm thinking of adding one of her better known novels because I think we should tackle fiction that straddles this genre and literary line a bit more often on the show. And because I was so disappointed with our last fantasy pick. Okay. And lastly, we're building a methane-powered dirigible for literary expeditions. Support steampunk cosplay and our podcast expenses at patreon.com/literaryroadhouse. Every bit helps. As always, share this podcast with the spy digging through your false bottom luggage for dirt. Until next time, read a good story.
Great outro.